Welcome to the sixth presentation on research. Today we shall be looking into the aspect of reading in research. How do we read and what should we take care when we read research papers? So far, we have done these areas, and all these topics that we have presented, each one is connected to the other one, and each one provides support to the next presentation that I made for you. The first was what is Introduction to Social Sciences. From there, we went on to understand the motivation for research, and once we could identify an area of interest, then we went on to see how do we formulate a research problem. Then we looked into how do we ask questions or how do we frame questions, and then how do we collect material for review. Now that we have collected material for review, the next part is how do we go about our reading. Now, reading a scientific paper or a research paper is different from reading a newspaper, a magazine, or a novel, for example. Now, what makes this reading of a different kind, and what should we take care while we read? Once we learn these little intricacies of reading a research paper, it will save a lot of time and you will get the best result of what you are doing. So, reading is a skill, and research teaches that particular skill. We all know that research review of literature has to be written because it forms the chapter in the dissertation work. But before we begin writing, we need to be reading well. So before we begin to write, be the reader. Now, what is this reading that you need to focus on? First thing is read the abstract of whatever material you have collected. These material, the journals will have, the articles will have an abstract. It is important to read the abstract because it will give you a world view about the problem of research that the writer wanted to convey, the research objectives, the methodologies that the research was conducted under, the final conclusion, the findings of that research, and finally the conclusion and discussion. So reading an abstract is extremely important because in a very short span of time you will be able to know what was in that research. And if you find it important for your research directly, keep it because you will want to read them again. The other thing that you need to do is to see who are the authors you are reading. These authors, if they are well cited, it is good because these citations indicate that the ideas of that author has been accepted by many and it is used in research. Similarly, where was it published and who published it? And was it at a seminar or a conference or a conference conducted by a college, or was it by seminars and conferences conducted by national and international bodies where abstracts have got a value? Then would you like to see whether what kind of a paper was it? Is it a review paper of literature, or is it a research paper? And then what is the time period? When was this published? How old is it? Then why do you want to read that paper? What is the reason you want to focus on that particular paper? And where was this research study conducted? The country, and also the variables and concepts that were used in that particular paper. And how did they conduct this review? How did they collect the data? How did they analyze the data? And so on. So reading is an artist's journey. There is no doubt about that. But reading can also be done efficiently and more meaningfully if we plan our reading a little more, be more focused in the reading. So several, also reading, you will encounter several terminologies which are totally new to you. You will find them sometimes frustrating, sometimes very disheartening and overwhelming because many things you may not understand the first time you read. That is perfectly all right. And that is what you need to learn. So unlike any other reading, now these new terms, terminologies, the concepts, words, etc., that is what you need to start learning to use them. So You can also make, when you're reading something, make notes of what is that new thing that you learned in that particular paper. It could be a new kind of a diagram, a new tool that you did not know, or a new way of collecting data, or anything, or an idea that was totally new to you, anything that interests you. That is what you should collect it, that you should make notes of while you read. If these papers seem directly relevant to your research, then keep it. Otherwise, you can shelve it away, and in case you need them later, you can always use them. But do not waste time on those articles which don't directly relate to your subject. You may want to read them at leisure for other reasons. Now, when you read this way, this reading will help you to categorize subjects. It will help you to put them into themes, and it will get you ready for writing the review. So if you're not organized at this stage, again, the writing part will become a botheration. So I'm trying to take you step by step so that you spend your time reading well. If you spend some time reading well, then the next stage becomes easier for you to pursue. Now, what is active reading? Active reading is also analytical in the sense, what are you looking for in that article? If it doesn't meet your expectations in terms of your subject, your research question, your research statement, then keep it away for a while. Then you need to assess what you're reading, you need to integrate the ideas that are there, and you can combine these ideas to form new ideas when you read. So you are reading very alert, you are very conscious of what you are reading. Now, you also need to read. When you read, you need to analyze the writer's perspectives. There are so many perspectives to social sciences problems, and therefore you need to understand what is the perspective of that particular writer. What is the philosophy of that writer? What is that school of thought in which he is focused on? So these are very important elements for us: the school of thought, the perspectives, the philosophy, the ideology of the writer, because they will guide the way the person has written that particular article. And you will also learn that there are so many philosophy, there are so many ideology, there are so many ways in which the same subject can be understood by different writers. You also need to look at the historical perspective, because most of the social sciences topics have got a historical background. Just for the today, if you can see, even science uses historical background. The pandemic that we are going through today, they immediately connected to the French flu that happened, say 100 years ago. So if data was not collected and kept for that 100 years, probably we would not have made sense of it now. So a historical perspective to any problem is always useful, but reading through the quick historical perspective, noting just the important changes or shifts that have taken place in that particular idea, and then coming back to reality. So that is what you need to do. You don't have to read all those articles that have been written there. Jump and read, because you need to know when what was written, and why it was discarded, or probably how the same idea has been carried on. Many ideas are relevant even today, but the context might be very different as it is today. You may also need to identify the problem as it was discussed in the paper, or you could want to see what was the scope of the paper, where was the limitation of the paper in terms of what has not been covered in the paper. You may also want to see where was the study conducted, because that will again give you the context for carrying out that research. So when you do this kind of reading, conscious reading or focused reading, you will discover many new words, new keywords that will be helpful to you. In fact, under the abstract itself, you will find classification of ideas, and therefore the keywords are also classified. So if you learn to understand what is this classification of ideas, how are they looking into, even that way you will start learning how to create keywords for your own research. The other important thing that happens with reading is you will be able to discover the theoretical structure of the writer, what he has or she has used, and then what is the conceptual framework that they have developed. Now, what we need to do at this stage is start deconstructing what we are reading. We read so many things, but then we need to deconstruct it. We need to break down into smaller and smaller pieces. So when we deconstruct these many ideas, you will find these ideas themselves can give you variables. They can give you the way we can understand the problem. You can raise research questions on those. And then you can also examine the data source, the methodology, and the tools of analysis. So when you do this much of focused reading, you will understand and learn to categorize ideas. That is very important, categorizing ideas, because each writer has got one set of idea. Now you are reading so many of them, so you need to put them into certain boxes or certain places so that they all relate to the same idea. And then you will learn how to rearrange the ideas according to what you feel is important. Now, also when you read, you need to justify and find out why these ideas were used by the writer. You need to critique the idea written. Critiquing doesn't mean criticism of the paper. What we mean by critiquing is we analyze the paper, we find out what could have been done, has not been done, what are the shortcomings of the paper, what is it that it has ignored, and so on. So you can critique the paper, you can assess the paper in terms of whether it has given you the kind of ideas that you require in your paper. So you need to learn to choose now. And when you need to learn to choose, you are also learning how to interpret, and you're able to compare and contrast ideas. This is a serious intellectual task of comparing and contrasting ideas. Author 1, author 2, author 3. So if there are 3 or 4 or 10 authors, compare their ideas. Do they have the same way of understanding the problem? Do they have differences of opinion about, or differences of the perspective that they have on the problem? Whatever. So you take one idea and you see what are the different ways the same subject has been written by different authors. Sometimes you will find that almost all of them agree to the same pattern. So you don't have much problem there, because that might be the standard way in which that research in that area has actually worked. Now, when you have deconstructed the paper, you will also find that new concepts that you have got, new ideas that you have got. Now you will have to build relationship between these ideas, terms and terminologies, and then try to connect something whole. So you broke them into pieces, now you're going to connect them and make them into one whole again after understanding it. So simply breaking it doesn't make any sense. Only after you read it, you break it, you identify it, then you go back and form your own ideas about that particular subject. Also very important in reading is to visualize reading. Visualize, because we are reading, that is a visual medium. But beyond that, what we need to do is, some people like to talk, some people may like to draw and remember their ideas. Some would actually draw flow charts and arrows and diagrams and things like that, because in that way we are connecting the many variables, many ideas, many perspectives that we have collected. So all of them have to be connected to each other. It should become a wholesome subject. So whatever category you have put, in that category you can put a flow chart, or one idea can have multiple flow charts, whichever way you want to understand. And today I'm told that there is a software called mind mapping. Mind mapping itself is an idea of Edward de Bono, where he talks about the creativity in thinking, and therefore one idea can generate so many multiple ideas. So you can see that software, if it is useful, you can try that. But nevertheless, you need to learn to write. Until you write, you will not remember what you have read, and it is a concrete presentation of your idea. So when you see something written on the board, if you have a board in the room, use the board. If you are using cards, you can use that, whichever method, but definitely put them in a visual form. And research as a journey is one of independent learning. So these are things that you will discover, you will find useful, and you will continue. And each of these reading, as I told you earlier, will open doors and doors. Therefore you need to know which one you want, to which door are necessary and which are not. Then when you are reading this way, you will find, okay, this is the last time I read that, Today I'm reading it, it looks like that it was the last one that I read, and this is something that is connected to that. So like that, you will be able to direct some set of articles of one kind into one area. That is called a theme, creation of a theme. So you will slowly learn how to make themes of various subjects that you are studying. Whatever the subjects are, you will learn how to make them into theme. It could be about the theme of if you're talking about malnutrition, you may understand malnutrition among children, about little ones below 3 years. It could be about mothers, it could be about senior citizen, about so many. So theme wise, you will be able to separate them, and that separation is very important. And you will also learn what are the debates that are happening in that subject. If you read the article very deeply, you will also discover the debates that are happening. You will know what are the knowledge gaps that are existing in those studies, and therefore why do these gaps exist, and how can you compensate that gaps by finding out your research study. So until you read them well, you will not be able to identify research gaps. Now, once you have done this much of reading, very focused reading, now what you do is you have an overview of what you have read. You can complete a set of ideas that you wanted, and you are able to get some kind of a semblance of what you have read, and you will feel some confidence in, okay, this is what you have read, and therefore it is giving you something to back upon. So reading, rereading, visualizing, these are very important elements in getting ready to write. So if reading is not complete, then writing can be quite messy, because you will be looking into these papers all the time and trying to figure out what is to be picked up from where. Then once when you're also reading these new research articles, you will also learn other things other than the subject, the gaps, the concepts, the variables, all that. You will also learn things like this. You will learn new concepts, you will learn new terminologies, you will learn words or vocabulary. Now the vocabulary of literature in in your subject will be very different from the literature that is there in other subjects. So when you read research papers, you will learn the vocabulary of your subject, and then you will learn new words, connecting words, phrases, which are very essential tomorrow when you have to write your review of literature. These words become very useful. So words like however, nevertheless, hence, other, comparing it, in contrast to. So these kind of words that are there, these are very important. See how these words have been used in the text, because that is what you will also need to use when you begin to write. So at that point of time, you cannot search for these things. So while you are reading, you can read them, note down these words that have been used by other writers, and they will stay in good state for you when you begin to write. Observe the language, how they write, what is the kind of language they use, how have they formed the sentences, in what tense have they written, present tense or past tense or first person, second person, third person, which way have they written their English. So since we may not be using English as a daily in our daily communication, yet most of the research that is written in English, and the most of the research papers that are available to us are in English. So this is also a good opportunity to refine our language, to refine the way we construct the ideas and develop the language skills, because tomorrow when you have to go to conferences and seminars and workshop, again language becomes English. So there you will need to learn this language well. So it's a good idea, without having any opinion or bias or prejudices against this language. That language can help us to move ahead with research. And you need to develop the theoretical framework. Theoretical framework, theory is a collection of ideas and concepts interlinked in such a way that it can explain a certain phenomena. So like a phenomena of international trade, why do countries trade with each other? So that's a question that we have. Then how do we understand which countries trade with whom, and what are they trading with each other? If they're trading with each other, what will they trade in, at what price they will trade in, and so on and so forth. So thus comes the theory of comparative advantage that we have in economics, or so many theories at Hecht-Jolin, and so many theories that have developed. So these theories in some sense gives us the grounding or the underpinning or the foundation of the research. So when we find theories of our subject, we feel grounded. Yes, there is a theory which explains our idea as well. So at this point, go back to your master's degree course and read up the very many theories that you had studied in the subject that you are researching now, and have an overview of all of them. You will need to learn these theories more intensely. And then you will find, in the theory itself, you will find keywords and questions and all of that, and then you will learn how to connect the issue that you have in mind, the theory. How can you connect the theory to your reading or to your research? This is what can happen when you begin to read your theory. So you also need to list out, there might be 7 or 8 theories about something. In that particular case, you will have to read all of them, but then choose the 1 or 2 that may be able to answer the problems that you have. So you need to read them so well that you can take a decision. Now I need to use a particular theory to explain the problem that I have in hand. So that is how theory reading becomes helpful. Then from theory building, you need to build a conceptual framework. So now you know the variables, you know the important connections that are there between the various variables, you know in what context the theory was built, and what are the likely outcomes of that particular theory, that also we know. Now we need to convert it into a concept. Now conceptual background. Now in the conceptual background, what we do, a conceptual framework, we will say what are those important variables we want, how are these variables connected to us, how shall we understand that these will, if they behave in this particular way, this is going to be the outcome of that particular relationship. So these kind of things, when you start thinking about it, will come once you start reading theories. You will be able to do that. But theories also have got definitions you will need to define. So for the same word, there can be a couple of definitions. Now all the definitions you may not agree. For example, if I ask you what is informal sector, there can be a couple of definitions given for informal sector, but you can also choose to define informal sector in your own language. So that method of defining a concept to suit your research can also be there, provided you have understood so many definitions that are given for that particular topic. Yeah, and then you can draw flow charts, you can draw the way your mind mapping can be done, you can establish relationship among these main variables, and by establishing all of this, you will be able to derive a methodology. To connect these variables in this way, what method will allow me to do this work? So that is how you will be able to connect your methodologies. Then you will also have when you create a conceptual framework, it also demarcates your study. It'll give you, or it will help you define your key scope of the study, rather than getting lost in the woods with so many different perspectives of the subject. What you can do is now get closer and know exactly what you want to study. And this is the famous work that you're going to do, which is about intellectually categorization. Now, why do we categorize and how do we learn this categorization? Categorization is when we put similar things together, the theme that I told you. So when we arrange ideas, what we read, into categories, there is a common line that will go in that category. And I always had given these examples to students, and they have understood this idea of categorization much easier. When I said in a washing machine, if you put the family's clothes in, you will find all kinds of clothes that comes washed out, and then it's quite complicated, in the sense there are so many clothes there. But what we do is, then we take out the clothes, and when it is dry, we categorize them, categories of A, B, C, D, in terms of the persons, or in terms of the nature of the garments, or in terms of the colors, or some way. So we are categorizing that set of clothes into different forms. And the same thing is what you're going to do with research now. So you can categorize these articles in terms of history, where you are looking at chronologically arranging these themes. So chronologically means age-wise. So when you get a topic, you can arrange them age-wise. But you can also you must do it theme-wise. So when you do theme-wise, what is happening is a particular theme, and in that theme, you can categorize by age. So if you have got a set of articles relating to animal human conflict, wildlife human conflict, if you're having, then in those themes, one is for eating, harming domestic animals, one is for injuries to human beings, third could be about the crops that are lost, fourth could be about the way we can prevent them. These are all themes. Now, when these are so many themes are there, in these themes, now what you should be doing is arrange them chronologically. So if you're talking about domestic animals that have been killed by these wildlife, then in that itself you can say theme wise. Theme wise you can still arrange them history wise. So in 2001, 2012, 2016, 2019. So the idea is about human wildlife which has attacked the domestic animals, but to write it down you can go by chronology. Now even theories, when you have a theoretical framework, there also you will do a review of literature on theories. So what are the theories that you have studied, arrange them chronologically, and tell us that what are those theories that you are reading, and how are these theories are different from each other, why do these theories appear at different points, or whatever that argument you want to build on theories. You may also want to divide your themes in terms of multiple themes you can have. You may also want to divide your literature in terms of methods, methodologies, and then say that these are the methods that have been used in these studies have used this method, these set of studies have used this method, another set of studies have used this method. So you can continuously segregate the methods also into different categories, which will be very helpful to you when you start writing your recitation review of literature paper, and will help you when you are doing your methodology chapter. Also the tools, how have the analytical tools been used, which study has used. You remember that I had told you in the last class that make a table and write all these things and keep. You will need to make this table here, so you can think of it and then put it into the table if you're putting it there. Or you may want to write as country studies in terms of context, in terms of countries. You in the country itself you can put Asian countries, you can put the American literature relating to that, or you can write the African literature relating to that, and specifically you may write Indian literature studying relating to that. If you want, you can write your state-wise literature also. So in some sense we are learning to mentally categorize something in categories. We are learning how to arrange them, and we are learning to learn how to read rapidly, how to get the ideas by reading, how to pick up the important points, how not to waste time reading things that are not necessary. So taking down points, these are some of the very important elements you must get ready before you begin to write, because otherwise writing and reading is quite arduous. So learn how to read, so that even when you have to read when you're writing, you have learned the skills of reading, so that you can pick up the idea very fast if you want to write down. Otherwise, at the writing stage, if you're going to learn how to read a research paper, both will get delayed and both will become very inefficient. So spend some time reading, focused reading. Take that paper, if you find it very difficult, read it at a time when you feel you will want to spend time on it. Read it then, but nevertheless reread, underline that, carry it on. And then the next presentation we shall make on how to write a literature review. So once we reach that stage, then you will find that you're much more comfortable, because now you know how to conduct reading, you know your problems and all of that. Then we will write it, and then you move ahead from there. So thank you very much. Share it with your other research scholars, and teachers will find this useful, because I understand that we may not get time to specially think and sit and read so many kinds of things. So it is all the more better that we sharpen the saw, we learn how to do it, then do the next one step by step. If you do it, it saves a lot of time, and it can be very motivating, because you know that you can complete your work well. Thank you very much. We'll see you the next presentation next Tuesday. I present the research videos on Tuesdays. So on Tuesday, you will find another presentation on how to write your literature review there. By then, I hope if you have any difficulty, you can definitely get back to me. There is a mail ID given. You can write back to me in case you would need any help from me. So thank you very much.